Hey everyone, it's a beautiful spring day. I was just out with my motorcycle and I felt that the Lord wanted me to share with you how He's been using motorcycle riding in my life. So I had been having dreams over the last 10 years or so where I was riding a motorcycle, and in a lot of the dreams I was learning how to ride a motorcycle. And a couple years ago I had just woken up from another one of these vivid dreams where I was learning how to ride a motorcycle. And I began to wonder why I kept having this same dream over and over again all these years. And I know that God often speaks to us in our dreams. And so I wondered if God was somehow telling me He wanted me to get a motorcycle. It seemed very strange to me. I couldn't imagine why God would want me to get a motorcycle. But, I prayed about it and I said, Lord, if this is what you're trying to show me, then please confirm it somehow. And literally an hour later, I had a contractor show up at my door because we were having some renovations done to our home. And the first thing that he said to me was that he was from out of town, but he was familiar with the area because he comes often to take his motorcycle for a ride. And then I remembered I just had a dream about riding motorcycles. And then he said to me, I was 41 years old when I got my motorcycle license. Well, at the time, I was 41 years old. So that was my confirmation. I knew that God was saying He wanted me to get my motorcycle license. So I mentioned it to my husband, and he actually told me he felt that the Lord had been putting it on his heart as well over the last few years to get a motorcycle. And so that was another confirmation. But neither of us had a clue as to why God would want us to ride motorcycles. I really had no desire whatsoever to ride a motorcycle. I'm just not the adventurous type. Maybe when I was in my 20s, but definitely not now that I'm in my 40s, but both of us made the decision that we were going to proceed in faith and trust God. His word says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And so the following spring, we proceeded to take steps to get our motorcycle license. And that's when it really started to sink in just what a commitment it was going to be of our time and also financially. And it started to sink in just how dangerous a motorcycle riding can be. I was really struggling with it, but, I decided I was going to proceed in faith and continue to trust in the Lord. So we got our motorcycle license, and shortly after that, we purchased a motorcycle. But what I wasn't prepared for was the amount of fear that I experienced when I first started riding. I remember the first time that I was catching enough wind where I wanted to put my visor down. I was trying to take my hand off the handlebar, and I couldn't. I was literally scared stiff, okay? And I wasn't even going that fast. But, the fear was very real. And, a few months went by, and I really didn't see much improvement at all. I was really struggling, and I was getting frustrated. I didn't understand why the Lord was wanting me to go through all this. The fear, it was just exhausting. And at one point, I was angry with God. I was just ready to give up. But then the Lord began to speak to me about fear. He reminded me that fear is a spirit. It's a spirit that we as believers have authority over. And up until that point, I was just coming in agreement with fear. And that's when I realized I needed to start doing some spiritual warfare. And so I started commanding that spirit to leave, and I was making prophetic declarations that I was not afraid. And that's when I started to notice some improvement. And now I'm at the point where I'm just starting to enjoy motorcycle riding. So a few months after we got our license is when the Lord finally revealed to us why he wanted us to ride motorcycles. And that's because he's giving us a motorcycle ministry. And in the last few weeks, he's been giving me instructions on how he wants us to start this ministry. And he also gave me the idea for this t-shirt, okay? God loves motorcyclists. And so, that fear was just the enemy's attempt to try to stop me from fulfilling the plan that God had for me. A lot of Christians really, I think, would have a hard time believing that God would tell someone to get a motorcycle. But don't put God in a box, meaning don't put limits on God or have expectations on how you think he's going to do things. The Jews, they didn't recognize Christ as their Messiah because they had these expectations on how he was going to be and the things that he was going to do. And so they were blinded by that religious spirit. So much so that they crucified their Messiah, But God says in his word, my thoughts are not your thoughts, and neither are my ways your ways. God can use anything for his purposes, including motorcycles. God loves motorcyclists, and they need to hear the gospel too. I also want to point out that God, he could easily have revealed to us from the very beginning why he wanted us to ride motorcycles, but he didn't. He waited until we were fully committed, until after we got our license and we started riding. And I believe that he did that because he wanted to test our faith. He wanted to know that we trust him and that we were willing to obey him, even though it didn't make sense, even though we didn't understand, and even though I was afraid. What is it that you're afraid of? That could be the very thing that God is calling you to. Remember, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. All right, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a blessed day.